Welcome everyone to the Blossoming Children channel. My name is Pragya, and we are, as you know, speaking about pregnancy and post-pregnancy, which is a very special and transformative phase in a woman's life. We're really lucky to have Sophia Mangala with us today, who is a dear sister and professional doula living in New York. Hi, Sophie.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you. And we were speaking earlier this week. I was learning so much from her. I've already had two kids, but I was like, really? What? Really? I didn't know that. So I'm sure you all are also going to learn many things. So hopefully you have your pencil and paper with you. And yeah, could you just start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into being a doula and what exactly is a doula?
I, like you, had my first baby about 6.5 years ago, and I kind of fell in love with birth as I was learning about it and going through pregnancy. And my birth ended up being very different than what I planned. And my team, I had a midwife and a doula, and they were incredible. And so I sort of decided, like, around that time that I wanted to support women through this journey the way that they supported me. It was really quite beautiful, and I'd never really had anything like that in my life until then. And I obviously hadn't had a transformational experience like birth until then either. And I think in our culture, it's just as um, not as like uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Venerated as it should be, right? It should really be um, held as sacred. So I'll tell you quickly the difference between a doula and a midwife. So I'm a doula. A
Mhm.
doula is someone who supports women and families through pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. Uh, Supporting as in bringing resources, a sort of a source of information, someone to talk to, someone to ask questions to. In the actual birth, I would support someone physically, so maybe like some comforting touch, massage, um, making sure that the husband is eating and taking care of himself as well, especially for a long birth. And so it's like a physical and spiritual support. A
Mm,
midwife is someone who is a medical provider. So a midwife is someone who is maybe checking the baby's heart rate and checking blood pressure and making sure that the mother and baby are safe. So none of that stuff is my job, which so mine is a little bit lower stakes. Um,
mm.
which I love both of these jobs, and I think they work really nicely together. I love working together with midwives to support the family as a whole.
Nice. How many years did you say you were doing this?
I've been doing it for about 4 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
So why do you feel like, in your opinion, this pregnancy and post-pregnancy phase is so special in a woman's life? Why is it so transformative?
Well, I mean, this is sort of the point of the species, right? Is to like procreate. But for humans, we have this added layer of it being like a spiritual transformation. And I think in
Mhm.
Sahaj, we can really feel this that our children are these like vessels of God coming through us, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't really prepared for how how much that was going to connect me to the divine. Like I feel like the year that I was pregnant and giving birth and immediately postpartum,
Mm.
those years were like the most kind of in touch with the divine that I've ever been.
Mm.
Because they call it the veil, right, between like life and death and the dimensions. And you're so close to that when you're giving birth. You sort of like go into these alternate dimensions,
Yeah.
right? Going through labor and then you come out the other side with your baby. And it's extremely transformational. And I will say, like, it's one of the most transformational human experiences that's available to us. And the fact
Yeah.
that men can't do it, only women can do this. It's like a real superpower. And such an opportunity for connection and growth and evolution. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I
it
feel
also
very
feels
passionate about
like, I guess, through the journey of motherhood, I feel like we discover this hidden treasure box inside of ourselves where we
it.
realize how much strength we have, how much love we have, how much patience we have, which we didn't know before, I suppose.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really a nice discovery. Sometimes when we are thinking about starting to have a family, things don't go according to our plan. So either baby doesn't come when we think baby will come, either we have miscarriages. What is your advice for women in going through that or have been through that, facing these
Well,
challenges?
yeah, this is a great question, and this is like the question, right? And again, like pregnancy and birth is this area where we really don't have much control. And I think these days in like our modern society, we have control over most aspects of our lives.
Hmm.
So that feeling of not having control is very unnerving for us. Like we don't like the feeling of not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing when it's going to happen. And I
Hmm.
think as yogis, though, we have a unique perspective into like surrender and really being able to just give this pregnancy
Hmm.
the mother and be like, Mother, I surrender. This is your baby. I'm
Hmm.
just a vessel. Um, I trust you to do what needs to be done here, and guide me along the way, right? And know that whenever you are
Hmm.
feeling that sense of out of control or unknowing or fear, that you can just put your attention on Sasra and you can really just ask Mother, like, please be with me at this time. And a mother has so much special attention on these mothers and babies that
Hmm.
it really when you can surrender like that, it makes it so much easier. And of course,
Yeah, and that's
there's
really all
the
you can do, isn't it? I mean, otherwise
exactly.
you just have to ride the waves and see how it all plays out.
Yeah.
Why do they say that the first trimester of pregnancy is like really important? I mean, of course, all the trimesters of pregnancy are important, but they say like the first trimester is so crucial and you shouldn't sit on the ground, you shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do that. And I don't, why do you feel like it's so important, maybe? And do you have any advice for women who are in their first trimester of pregnancy?
Mm. Yeah, so I haven't heard mother speak a lot about this except like those small things that you just mentioned. But my intuition about it is that these souls are when they come in, when they're new in the first trimester, that my sense is they're not as firmly anchored into this like physical plane. And so and we are also much more vulnerable to negativity, to bad attention from other people, things like this. And so we really have to make a big effort to protect ourselves in this super vulnerable time. And that includes like the content we're consuming. Like, a lot of times it's like, where we watch true crime on a regular basis or
Hmm.
something like
Hmm.
that. And so during this time, I think it's really important to go inward, really feel like, is this that I'm consuming or what I'm putting my attention on, is this beneficial for me and my baby? Is it benevolent? And if it's not, then just take a break from it. Because
Hmm.
we are super vulnerable. And of course, our babies, whatever we are experiencing, our babies are experiencing it vicariously inside of us.
Yeah.
And this can be understood very well vibrationally. It's a little harder to explain this to non-yogis.
Yogis.
But that's my sense, is that these souls are very that they're tethered in a less concrete way, to our physical world in
Hmm.
that first trimester. And then once their Kundalini comes in and we pass that first 12 weeks, the miscarriage rate goes significantly down. And also
Hmm.
it's considered like safer to do, these more, I wouldn't say riskier, but like, to be kind of out and about in the world and you're not quite as vulnerable.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
the
sense.
attacks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm.
When we think about pregnancy as a whole, we know that there are probably some superfoods to eat and there are probably some foods to avoid.
Hmm.
So of course, we have cravings and we have food aversions, but are there just good things to eat and good things to avoid generally in pregnancy?
Yes. So good things to eat, and this is not spoken about enough, but protein. Protein, 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 protein,
Okay.
because those are the building blocks of life.
Yeah.
And so the vast majority of pregnancy related complications stem from not having enough protein. And I'm talking a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So not everybody here does pounds.
That's a lot.
Sorry, I'm in
Yeah.
America. But so like 100 100 to 150 grams of protein per day when you're pregnant, which is a lot of protein.
Which is a
And
lot
it's
of
actually hard to get that much protein in. I'm going to actually drop in the chat. I have this document that I've created with tons of links.
yeah.
And the first thing that I've linked is a book called Real Food for Pregnancy. It's by this perinatal nutritionist. She's incredible. She's done a lot of work around like ancestral ways of eating during pregnancy where
Mhm.
it was understood that women required these amounts of protein and also good fats, which has been,
Yep.
again, quite demonized, especially in the West. But it's extremely important because brains are made out of fat. You need
Mhm.
fat and you need protein to grow baby. And this is why vegan and even vegetarian diets can be dangerous for pregnant women because we really need that protein, and it is very hard with a
Mhm.
plant-based diet to get enough protein. Um,
Would
so
you say that protein powder is a good source of protein just to fill in where you can't get the
yes,
meats and the
especially a
eggs
high
in?
quality one. Like I highly recommend if you're going to do a protein powder, do something that's like animal based. So like a whey protein. And look at the ingredients. The fewer ingredients, the better. You want something simple. You don't want a ton of like fillers and chemicals and stuff.
Yeah.
But yes, if you need to do a protein powder, that can be very helpful. And I would add it to like, yogurt or a smoothie or something to kind of
Yeah.
help get it down. Hmm.
And what foods should you just avoid generally? Like, should you avoid caffeine? Is that a myth, or is it true that pregnant women shouldn't have caffeine?
So I would say, you know, small amounts are probably okay. Like if you want to have black tea, if you want to have one latte a day, like I think this habit of like denying ourselves completely is not balanced. And if we're going to be dreaming about coffee, like just let yourself have a little coffee just within
Okay.
reason, like and use your intuition.
Yeah.
This is your baby and your body and your pregnancy. The conventional talk about like not having sushi during pregnancy, not having raw foods, not having soft cheeses. These are vary from country to country. And like if you go somewhere like Japan, you bet that pregnant women are eating sushi. Like so, these things can be um dogmatic
Mhm.
because the whole thing with like sushi or raw foods is, oh, we're worried about like E. coli or food poisoning, but now it's been proven that you're more likely to get E. coli from lettuce, you know
Yeah.
so should we just tell pregnant women not to eat salads? Nobody does that.
Mhm. Yeah.
um so I highly recommend doing your own research and talking to your provider, but also like seeing, like doing your research and like seeing, does this make sense logically, or is this just like a rule that maybe used to be make sense and now it's like been debunked by evidence. Unfortunately, a lot of the like mainstream um, nutritional advice around pregnancy has been proven to be not the best.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, and this book, Real Food for Pregnancy, is a great resource. There's a couple books that I've linked here specifically for nutrition,
Perfect.
which all focus on ancestral ways of eating and preparing food. So those are really helpful. And there's a lot of them have recipes too for like making sure you're getting all the appropriate um, protein, fats, carbs, all these important
Yep.
things. So those would be.
And drinking enough water. I think that's something that we don't mention
Mhm,
enough, but that's super important,
mhm.
isn't it?
And water with minerals in it. So if you're
Okay.
drinking filtered water, I highly recommend some kind of like trace mineral drops to put in it, because water that humans used to always drink would be like from springs, and it would be rich in
Hmm.
manganese and calcium
Mm.
and silica and lots of other minerals. And now, because our water is so hyper treated, it's dead. So it's actually not super hydrating, which is why people will use like electrolyte powders and things like that. So remineralizing your water is a great thing to do. Drinking water with like lemon in it or coconut water, things like that can be, or even just like a high quality salt in your water, a pinch of that can be really helpful for also
Okay.
like remineralizing. Mhm.
What would you say on the topic of weight gain in the pregnancy? Is there too much weight gain?
Mhm.
Is that a thing? Is it just let your body do what your body does? What would you say on
I mean, they'll tell you it's a thing, maybe.
that?
You know, a lot of providers will weigh moms when they're pregnant, at which you can decline. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. However, we're not robots. Our bodies are all different, and our each pregnancy is different, right? And I'm sure you remember this,
Hmm.
that like with your
Hmm.
different pregnancies, you probably gain different amount of weight, just like I did.
Hmm.
So the best recommendation is making sure you're getting all the nutrients you need. So that's one thing we talked about. Making sure that you're not going hungry, so you're not like restricting yourself,
Hmm.
but that you're also not going crazy with things like ice cream and chips and and
Yeah.
it's okay to have these things sometimes. We have cravings. It's okay to
Yeah.
satisfy them.
Yeah.
But oftentimes if we're craving something that's unhealthy, it's trying to satisfy something else in us. Like for instance, if you crave ice cream during your pregnancy, which I did, it could mean that you're calcium deficient. And so your
Mm.
body is like craving that ice cream to make up that calcium, and you can get it in better ways like yogurt,
Interesting.
um,
Okay.
milk, things like that. Even leafy greens have a lot of calcium in them. So um, I always recommend to my clients, like, don't pay too much attention to the scale. Pay attention to how you're feeling. Do you feel good after you've eaten? Do you feel satisfied? Are you moving your body enough? Like
Mm.
it's really important to be active in when you're pregnant. You don't have to go to Zumba class, but you should be walking around. Like
Mhm.
yoga's great. Um, it, it's going to help you in labor and then obviously in new parenthood as well if you're moving throughout your pregnancy because you're just going to keep your body in good shape. And throughout human history, we were never just like sitting on the couch throughout our pregnancies.
Right.
And so it's really important to keep moving. And when you're doing those things, you're going to gain like the perfect amount of weight, whatever
Perfect.
that is.
Whatever that is.
Mhm.
As we become more pregnant, or maybe it even happens earlier, but for me it was towards the end, you start to get the heartburn and you start to get maybe a bit of nausea again.
Mhm.
What are your natural remedies for things like heartburn and nausea during pregnancy?
Mm. So nausea often can stem from not having enough protein. So if you're feeling nauseous, I recommend either small meals with lots of protein or like snacks throughout the day with protein. So don't just have like a banana. Have a banana with nut butter on it.
Mm,
Have yogurt with you could have yogurt with honey in it, like full fat yogurt, not low fat yogurt. Have crackers with cheese. Have things with that have protein and fat in them that is going to not only keep you full, but it's also going to keep that nausea at bay. And a lot of times women will feel nauseous in the morning sickness,
hmm.
and
Hmm.
they are not eating right away. You have to wake up and eat right away and eat something high in protein. Have some meat, have some eggs, have some avocado with it, like high
Okay.
quality.
So just
That
having
exact
those saltine crackers next to your bed is not really enough somehow.
No, have that with peanut butter. Have
Yeah.
that with cheese.
Okay.
But by itself, like a cracker, it can help with the like heartburn and nausea.
Hmm.
Having those plain carbs, but I highly recommend pairing it with some fat and protein.
Okay.
Um, yeah, even like hummus, or like some kind of dip or something can be really helpful.
Yeah.
And those things are gonna, like I said, keep nausea at bay. The other things you can do is like you can drink peppermint tea for nausea. What really helped me was I got these like menthol lozenges, like cough
Hmm.
drops, and I would suck on those, and those actually really helped. So you can try things like that. For heartburn, papaya enzymes, or digestive enzymes, is like a supplement you can find at any drugstore. That can really help with heartburn. Apple cider vinegar in water. So you put like a tablespoon of apple
Okay.
cider vinegar in a cup of water and drink it. Heartburn comes when your body is creating, it's like the pH of your body is too basic. So your body's creating extra acid to try and
Mm.
balance it out, and you're feeling that acid here. So the way
Okay.
you balance it out is actually more acid.
Okay.
And some people will swear by milk for heartburn as
I
well.
did take a glass of milk and I
Yeah.
think I think it did help.
Yeah. Or
Would
some
you?
people take Tums.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these kinds of
Okay.
things can be helpful.
Okay. Good to know. So it would be a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water?
I would say a tablespoon if you can stomach it.
Okay.
But yeah, and you'll get used to it actually. It's not bad.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
So I know that Shimachi has said, and I think she even told my own mom this as well, if the mom is happy during pregnancy, the baby will be happy,
Mm,
that there's such a connection. But what do you do if you have anxiety or emotions, any other kind of emotions during the pregnancy?
mm.
I guess that would make you even more stressed because you're like, oh, the baby's going to be feeling this. So it's, what do you do?
Yeah.
And how do
Yeah.
you reduce these feelings? Like, what, yeah.
Yeah, again, I think like as yogis, we have such a oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? We have such an advantage in this area, right? That we have this tool, which is meditation, that a lot of people don't have, where we can really tap into our spirits. We can get into thoughtless awareness. We can um, consciously connect with mother and just say like, I am not like I'm not in charge here. I surrender. I trust you to take care of this baby and to take care of me. And that surrender is going to give us a lot of peace, I think.
Mm.
Just as it does in our everyday life, but especially around
Mm.
baby stuff. And mother has said like don't, these are my babies.
Yeah.
We are the vessels of these babies, right? Like
Yeah.
these are not our children that we're bringing into the
Hmm.
world in this. And I think part of that anxiety and that feeling of wanting to control can come from that feeling of like, well, this is my child and this is my birth and I have to, if I don't do this, nobody will.
Hmm.
And that it can be very freeing to surrender that and be like, actually, you know what? I'm not in charge of this.
Yeah.
Um, and so meditation can be very powerful there. And the other thing I will say is connecting with your baby, because of course we're going to have moments where we're upset, where we're scared, where we're anxious, where we're maybe we almost get in a car accident or we miss a step, and our heart goes like that. And the baby feels that. And so the best way to deal with
Mm.
this is to be like, oh my gosh, baby, like that was scary. We missed a step. Like, are you okay? I'm okay.
Yeah.
We're okay.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
connecting and reminding like you're one. So the baby is feeling what you're feeling. And so when you give yourself that reassurance, your baby is also getting that reassurance.
Yeah.
And this is really powerful because this will extend, as you know, into motherhood beyond pregnancy when your baby is like sensing something coming from you and you have to be like, it's okay, we're okay, everything's
Yes.
all right. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
And I think Shmaji has said also that, if we start finding that we're thinking a lot and we're becoming very speedy mentally, maybe better to not put the ice pack on the liver, but to put it on the ego as well.
hmm Yeah, and when you're pregnant, we just want to be careful about putting ice, near the baby.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, ice, and then I would say foot soaks, can definitely always be good. Um, and um, and yeah, again, that like meditation is basically always going to be
Always a
helpful in
good
these
fallback plan.
situations. Yeah, and no matter where you are, you're sitting in your car and you put your attention up,
Yeah.
it's so simple to do and it's such a potent tool that I think we forget about, but it's something that we have that we should really use as much as possible.
Yeah. When, especially towards the end of the pregnancy, when our bellies are nice and big and stretched, they become very itchy. Do
Mm.
you have any creams that you would recommend to put on the stomach? I mean, actually, we should be putting it on throughout the whole pregnancy, but just to
hmm
relieve the itchiness.
Yeah, so I would say I would start, you know, in early pregnancy. Any kind of like food grade oil is good. So like almond oil, coconut oil, I would only use if it's very hot out. Um, you could even use olive oil if you don't have almond
Hmm.
oil. Or you could use like there's places that will sell pregnancy belly oils or lotions. I would say again, just like look at the ingredients. You want to make sure you understand what each ingredient is. So many of the lotions these days have ingredients that have like, 20 letters in them. I don't know what that means. I'm not putting that on my belly.
Yeah.
Especially when I could use something like almond oil, which is
Yeah.
just plain.
Yeah.
One thing that's extremely helpful topically, not just on your belly, but on your whole body during pregnancy is a magnesium, either lotion or a magnesium oil. And the reason for this is almost all of us are deficient in magnesium, again, because it used to be like in spring water, and now nobody drinks spring water. We drink this
Hmm.
very highly filtered water. And so we are all almost all a little bit magnesium deficient. And magnesium is wonderful for sleeplessness. So if you're having any kind of insomnia, magnesium's great. If you have restless legs, if you have like aching muscles or you're getting like cramps in your legs,
Mm-hmm.
Magnesium's great. Magnesium is also amazing for having regular bowel movements. So constipation is a very common pregnancy side effect. So magnesium, both topically and also ingesting like a magnesium powder, can be extremely helpful for constipation. So a magnesium lotion could go right on your belly or an oil or something. So that's extremely helpful to have. And I highly recommend having that on hand just in case because it can only ever help.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So when we are, so at what point in the pregnancy should you start thinking about a birth plan? And like what is a birth plan to begin with?
So, basically, the wherever you're giving birth is going to have a certain standard of care, right? They're gonna most of the places that I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm in the United States. My dual experience is exclusively in the United States, so that is my area of expertise. And I know that things are different in different countries, so take this with a grain of salt. Um, a lot so all the hospitals here basically will have like a protocol that they do, and so anyone who comes in, they're basically like A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, because the way that the system is set up, they just don't have the time and space for individualized care. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want individualized care, which you should want because you are an individual and you're different than the person on either
Mm-hmm.
side of you, you have to be the one to do the research, decide what you do and don't want, and then put it into a plan so that when you do get to your birthing location, it's very clear what you want, it's very clear what you don't want. When you're in labor, you're in a very vulnerable, suggestible state. And so if you have these things written down, it's very hard for someone else to be like, oh, well, I didn't know that you didn't want XYZ. It's like, well, it's right here in my birth plan. And your
Okay.
partner, your husband, should also be familiar front and back with your birth plan so that if something is happening that is against that you have not wanted and has not been talked about, he can step in and be like, what's going on here? Like, we have some questions. Um, and the best way I think to that I've done as a doula to sort of defuse these situations is to just be like, can we have a minute to think about that?
Mm.
So that kind of tells everybody to leave the room, and then you can talk to your partner and or your doula about it, and you can ask, make sure that you have questions ready, and then when they come back in, you can ask your questions and you can make an informed decision as opposed to, having to make a decision with everybody staring at you and you feel like you're under pressure and you have to just make a choice right now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we think about hospital plan, so there's the hospital, no, sorry, birth plan. There's the hospitals, there's the home birth, and there's the birthing centers.
Hmm.
Personally, I did the hospital for both my kids, simply because I felt like if anything goes wrong at home, I want to be reassured that I have the medical equipment nearby. So that was the reason I didn't do a home birth, but I like the idea of a home birth because you've got your music and your candles and it's in your house and it sounds so nice. So I like the idea, but I never did it simply because I thought, well, if something goes wrong, we won't be equipped. What would you say about that?
So, my first baby was a planned home birth, and we actually ended up transferring to the hospital and having a C-section. And my second baby was born at home. So I'm like I like totally understand your concerns. And the what I'll say about that is, so here. Um, Home birth midwives are medical professionals, as I talked about at the beginning of our meeting. And when I was interviewing midwives, and I highly recommend whoever you decide to have at your birth, interview them, interview a couple of them, because every doctor and midwife is going to practice a little bit differently, and it's really important to make sure that your team is aligned with what you want. So if you know that you want an unmedicated birth, you probably shouldn't be with a doctor whose specialty is epidurals and C-sections because that doctor is not going to really know how to support your vision of an unmedicated birth, right? So it's super important to talk to your providers, vet them, right? So my midwife, when I interviewed with her, I asked her like, what would you do in that case, right? If we had an emergency. And she told me what she brings to my birth and in her bag. She brings oxygen, she brings neonatal resuscitation equipment, she brings medications and tools to address a hemorrhage. She brings IV fluids. She has many different options. So she's got like 3 or 4 different ways to deal
Mm.
with each emergency, basically. And she tells me, and we also have a backup plan. So we know that if there's an emergency, we're going to this hospital that's, 10 minutes down the road.
Hmm.
And, we know that if this is what's going on, we're going to call 911 and we're going to we're going to make sure that it's taken care of. I'll say that I've been to about 100 births. I've never once seen an emergency that was so emergent that there wasn't time to
Save the baby.
make a move, right?
Yeah.
Or like most of the time when a baby is struggling or something like that is going to happen, there are signs leading up to it. It's not that usually that the baby's fine, the baby's fine, the baby's fine, and then all of a sudden the baby's not fine. It's usually the baby's showing us through like their heart tones and things like that, that they're like struggling. And so if we
Mm.
see that happening, and I've been to multiple home births that have ended in hospital transfers for exactly this reason. And so that's what the hospital's there for, right? Is like when these low risk births become higher risk. And so then we go
Mm.
there and we utilize those tools. Um, I will say, you and I talked about this. The two most important things you could do to have a great birth experience are, like I said, make sure you have a team that is super aligned with you, that knows your birth preferences and vision and supports them. And the second thing is the location. You need to give birth where you're comfortable. If you're not
Mhm.
comfortable giving birth at home, that's not where you should be giving birth
Yeah.
because you're not going to be able to fully relax and surrender to birth
Yeah.
if you're not comfortable.
Yeah.
So that's why it's super important to go. There's no right or wrong place to have a baby,
Yeah.
but there might be a right or wrong place for you to have a baby based on your personal feelings and
Yeah.
experiences.
Yep, that makes sense. What are some early signs to know that someone is in labor? So, for example, my own personal experience is with my second child. I already had a 2-year-old, so I spent the whole day running around and we were looking at new apartments to get and you do the food shopping. But actually, I realized only upon reflection that I was in labor the entire day because I lost the mucus plug in the morning, but I didn't realize that's what it was. So would have been good to know that that's what was going on. So I would have maybe slowed down. But what are some early signs of labor?
Yeah, so cramping. So that feeling of like they feel like kind of like menstrual cramps. And they start mild and then, as they get more and more intense, and those are actually contractions, but they start out feeling crampy. So that
Hmm.
cramping can be a sign of labor. If you're before your due window and you feel that kind of cramping, don't panic because dehydration can also cause that. So if you're feeling that, hydrate, 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 hydrate. If it doesn't go away, then you can, maybe talk to your provider and see what needs to be done, but a lot of times it will go away. So, but the cramping is the sign of early labor. Losing your mucus plug can be, but you could be losing your mucus plug for like a couple weeks
Okay.
prior to labor, and it can actually
Hmm.
regenerate. Or you might never lose your. I've never seen my mucus plug, and I've had 2 babies, so like
Okay.
it's different for everybody. Some people might start labor with their water breaking, and it's usually not as dramatic as you see in the movies. It's almost never like I mean, it is sometimes, but
Gosh.
not
Yeah.
usually a huge splash. It's more like a
Yeah.
trickle.
Yeah.
But some people, their water doesn't break until the baby's coming out. So that's
Yeah.
also, there's no like surefire way to know you're in labor other than that whatever's
Yeah.
happening
Just pay
doesn't
attention
stop.
to your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually with second babies, that does happen where you'll be in mild labor all day, and then as soon as your older child goes to bed, your labor ramps up.
Yeah.
Because your body's just like knows that it doesn't want to give birth with your older child around. And so as
Yeah.
soon as your older child is like dealt with and put to bed, then you're like suddenly in labor.
Yeah.
This is very common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
Mhm.
So we know that all pregnancies and all birth experiences are totally unique to the person, but if you had to give your top advice to someone during labor, what would be your top advice?
Well, first of all, prepare. So, you wouldn't go into a marathon without preparing for it first, right? So you should prepare for labor because it's this very intense um, physical feat that you're going through. And if you don't know what to expect and you don't know what's normal, it can feel very scary. And the more, like, if you're scared, it feels more painful. So, I highly recommend taking a childbirth education class while you're pregnant, preferably not through the hospital because the hospital often will offer them. But I found that the hospital courses often teach you how to be a good patient more than like how to advocate for yourself and how to navigate labor. That's my experience here. Again, I
Mhm.
can't speak to any other country. Um, but if you take an independent childbirth education, it will talk to you about like what normal labor looks like, what signs to look for, different like coping strategies for labor, especially early labor, when you're home if you're not in the hospital yet. It will talk to you about your different like options for interventions and pain relief. It will talk to you about like the different stages of labor and how to navigate them, best practices. So I highly recommend taking a childbirth education class. I feel like birth is like one of the few things that people go into with like little to no
Yeah.
research on it first. And it's like there's not much else that you would go into that you know nothing about without preparing first. So I highly
Yeah.
recommend preparing. And then the other thing, which is again very obvious, but also really hard to do, is surrender. Uh,
Yeah.
surrender, because the more you can let go and release and relax, the less painful labor is, and the more smoothly it will unfold.
Yeah.
Um, Generally speaking, there's no
Yeah. I mean, I
guarantee.
definitely went into a full panic mode when I realized how painful it is. Like, they're not joking when they say it's very painful. It's very painful.
Mhm.
But is there like a breathing technique? I guess you would learn this in the course, but is there generally
Yeah,
something to kind of ride the
intentional.
waves of pain?
Yeah, so intentional relaxation is really important. So, you know that I'm sure everyone's tried this before, that like sort of technique where like if you're going to sleep, you like intentionally relax your feet, then your
Yeah.
ankles, then your
Mm,
legs, and you let your whole body like melt into the bed. I recommend practicing that during pregnancy because when you're in labor, when you go into a contraction, our natural response to pain is to tense up, right?
yeah.
But doing that actually makes the contraction more painful and it makes it harder for your body. You're
Yeah.
laughing because this is what you did.
This is what I
You're
did.
um it makes it more painful and it makes it harder for your body because your body, your cervix needs to open. Your body
Yeah.
needs to open. Your pelvic floor needs to
So
relax.
opposite to what your
Yes.
brain is telling you in that moment. Like
Yes.
your
And
brain
this
is
is why you need
saying,
to practice.
"Wah!" You
Yes.
know?
And this is why practicing is so important, because
Yeah.
when you get into the moment, and it's really important that your partner knows what you're doing, because when you're having a contraction, your partner can say, relax,
Mm,
and
yeah.
like when you intentionally relax, you're going to see the contraction suddenly is less painful when you've relaxed and just allowed it to move through you.
Yeah.
And one trick that they say is like open jaw, open cervix. So basically, like when
Okay.
your jaw is open, and you're making a low sound, it actually releases your pelvic floor. And you can
Mm,
feel that. So like right now, if you sit here and you go like, and you make like a high sound, you can feel your pelvic floor go like this. And
mm,
if you go like, oh, you can feel it actually release
mm,
and get looser. And so that like low sound and the open jaw will automatically make the rest of your body relax. So these are like really important things to know beforehand and then be able to
yeah.
practice. And this is the
100%.
reason that so many people find labor to be so painful, is they've done like no prep on how
No.
to move through these contractions, which is
Yeah.
a sensation you've never felt before.
Yeah.
And it's hard. But the great thing about contractions is they usually only last a minute. So I'm like, can you do this for a minute?
Doesn't feel like it, but yeah.
It
Okay.
doesn't, but then it's going to be over, and you get a
Yeah.
break, and the break is almost always longer than the contraction. So for
Yeah.
me, that was the whole thing. I was like, this is a mind game, and it is. It's like
It is a mind
it's
game.
the same as like intense athletics, right? Like they
Yeah.
always say your body will give out, or your mind will give out before your body. So if you've
Hmm.
trained your mind that like I can do this hard thing for 60 seconds, you can, and your body is
Is
not
it
going to
really
produce.
just a minute, though? I mean,
Yeah, I
really.
mean, once in a while you'll get a contraction that's longer, but typically, yeah, they're like a minute.
Wow. Yeah.
And then the breaks between are typically longer. So, um, yeah, and it's cool because our bodies give us, these breaks. Like
Yeah.
if your labor is 24 hours, you're not actually contracting for those 24 hours. You're
Yeah.
contracting, you know, every 3 minutes, so 1 minute is a contraction and the other 2 minutes are rest. So you actually
Right.
get a lot of rest within that labor.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
good it's good to know that. And it really is a mind game. I would say that with my second son, I didn't take the epidural, felt the pain in all its glory
Mhm.
because I was not relaxed. But I came out of that experience feeling that I could do anything, like I was superwoman,
Mhm.
like
Hmm.
You know, you feel like you have touched the depths of your strength when you, and that
Yes.
touching that allows you to get through the rest of motherhood.
And I will say your partner seeing you do that, like takes your
Makes you
relationship to
look more,
another level because he sees like,
become
whoa,
heroic.
she is strong. Like men could not do this, you guys. It it's incredible. So I love this is one of my favorite parts of this work is like seeing these couples move
Yeah,
through labor together and it just like strengthens their bond because they're seeing each other in this super vulnerable, like you said, touching the depths of their strength and it's just like
yeah,
really powerful. It's
yeah.
really powerful.
Great. So before we move on to post-pregnancy, if anybody has any questions about the pregnancy section so far, please just write some questions in the chat so we can come back to it at the end. What is the difference in healing time for a vaginal birth versus a cesarean birth?
So it sort of depends on how your birth goes. Um, they say the normal amount of time that everyone should be healed in, like fully healed, should be 6 weeks. A lot of women will heal before that. The best thing that you can do to heal quicker is rest. Like rest like you've never rested before. Um, I'm talking like stay in bed for days. Even if your birth is smooth, even if you have a vaginal birth with no tearing, rest. Okay, so in many indigenous cultures around the world, it's understood that if you do this 40 days, right, or like usually, in most cultures it's 40 days or like a month and a half or whatever. They say that if you do these 40 days after your baby's born, and mothers talked about this, you're setting yourself up for the next 40 years.
Mm,
So, and this is a huge problem I see with women here, at least. Maybe it's a New York thing because we're all very right-sided, but women have a very hard time resting, even when it's their first baby and they don't, their partner's doing all the cooking, like they have nothing else to do. They have a very hard time just resting.
mhm.
So we have this rule that's, I like to say 7-7-7. So it's like 7 days in the bed. So you could be on the couch too, but you have to be either seated
Resting.
or horizontal.
Mhm.
7 days. The next 7 days should be like around your home, like around the room, even, right? If you have a big house or whatever, don't go
Yep.
downstairs, just be around the room. And then the last 7 days can be around the home, or like here, we live in apartments here. So I say the last 7 days is around the block.
Okay.
But basically, if you take those, that's 3 weeks. If you take those first 3 weeks and you intentionally devote them to rest, and I'm talking like all you're doing is feeding the baby and going to the bathroom and showering. That's it. All your
Mhm.
other needs, ideally, should be seen to by the people taking care of you. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, shopping, none of that is you. That's all your people. And when you set this up prenatally, like when you're pregnant, set this up so that by the time your postpartum comes, you know that you can really rest. And resting is the best thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for your baby and for your family. Because once you've rested for those couple weeks and you've really like given yourself this time and ideally those 40 days, inside, you're going to feel so resourced. You're going to feel well
Mm,
fed. You're going to feel healed. You're going to have energy. You're going to really be able to serve your family in the best way possible. And I see a lot of women make the mistake of not resting enough and burning out and not healing, and they're still 6 weeks out and bleeding. So don't
mm,
do that to yourself because it's not worth it.
not worth it. When we speak about postpartum depression,
Mhm.
that comes with its own symptoms. But
Mhm.
earlier you had mentioned to me postpartum mood disorders,
Mhm.
which is different to the
So,
depression.
so postpartum mood disorder is like the umbrella of like issues that you can have, mental issues that you can have that are related to being in that childbearing year.
Okay.
So postpartum depression falls under that category.
Okay. And what are some
So
of the symptoms then to know if you have something?
yeah. So in the first 2 weeks after your baby's born, your hormones are kind of going all over the place. They're readjusting. After you give birth and your placenta is out, your progesterone drops. Progesterone is the gestation hormone that you've had increasing throughout your pregnancy. And and when your milk starts coming in, your progesterone level drops and your prolactin is the hormone that creates milk, goes up. And this is the most dramatic shift in hormones that any human ever experiences, like more than puberty, more than menopause. It's very dramatic. And so we say when the tears come, the milk comes because you're usually very weepy that day. Totally normal. When I see my clients crying like a couple days after their baby's born, I'm like, yeah, your milk is coming in. This is great. And
Yeah.
so in those first 2 weeks, it's a very normal to be weepy, to be kind of like all, happy, sad, like oscillating between, grief and happiness. And it's very strange, right? You feel like you're about to have your period, but like times 100. And so in those first 2 weeks, that's considered normal. And we just call that baby blues if you're feeling sad or not yourself. After those first 2 weeks, we really want to see you coming back to your baseline, which is like it's hard. You're going to be tired. Like you might have um things you're thinking about, things on your mind, but there should be moments of joy in the day. You should be enjoying your baby. You should be bonding with your baby. If after those first 2 weeks you're not feeling bonding with your baby, you're feeling sad all the time, you just feel not yourself, something's not right, and check in with your partner because they're going to be the best person to be able to know whether you're at your baseline or not. That could be an indication that something else is going on that needs to be addressed. Um,
Mhm.
so in addition to postpartum depression, there's also postpartum anxiety, which manifests as intrusive thoughts that are like not really rooted in reality. Like I had one client who was afraid to walk by a window, even a closed window, while holding her baby because she had this
Mhm.
thought that like her baby would somehow fall out the window. A closed window. I mean, she knew logically that that made no sense, but
Yeah.
she just had this feeling of dread inside her.
Yeah.
And that was a postpartum anxiety symptom. Like it was preventing her from doing regular activities. And so those are red flags, right? And then the other one that's become more well known now is postpartum OCD, which is this urge to like have everything be just so, or
Mm.
like this feeling of like if you don't do things in this particular order or this particular way, then something bad will happen. And again, these are things that are like out of your range of normal. Like these are things that you normally wouldn't be dealing with and that are, again, preventing you from going about your normal routine. So these are all things that I would be concerned about. I would say it's definitely a good idea to talk to especially a perinatal health profession, mental health professional, because they're trained to spot these things. And I'll also mention that postpartum mood disorders can show up anytime within the first year after you've had your baby. So it could be 6 months out, it could be 9 months out,
Mm.
and you could start having these feelings, and that's still within the range of like when it could be considered a postpartum mood disorder. And then
Wow.
obviously if any of these are not addressed and continue to go on, they can become worse and worse, and then we get into the realm of postpartum psychosis. And this is where women like basically have a break from reality. And we've all heard these stories of women who like um kill their babies or hurt themselves, and this is postpartum psychosis, and this is very, very serious and it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
So take care of yourself, make your partner aware of these red flags, and just check in with each other often so that this
Yeah.
doesn't become a
And
problem.
maybe in the early days, speak to your sisters and your friends and your
Yes.
mothers and your grandmothers, just also to be reassured that this is all normal and it's okay. And everybody
Mhm.
has, everyone has to ride these mood swings after birth. When
Mhm.
we speak about breastfeeding, which is another big topic, Shri
Mhm.
Mataji has given lots of advice on this about she's spoken about avoid the wind-producing foods, so
Mhm.
everything that grows under the earth, beans, carrots, potatoes, spices, onions, garlic, cabbage, tomatoes, raw fruits, like a whole lot of them.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else to add to what should be avoided? And then what are the really good foods to have when you're breastfeeding? I think it's the rich foods,
Mhm.
proteins, as you said. What could be added to these lists?
So I would say the other thing is like just be careful again with caffeine because whatever you consume goes through your breast milk. So again, like having one coffee is going to be okay, but don't, I wouldn't have like a triple espresso and
Yeah,
then breastfeed because your baby's not going to go to sleep after that.
right.
Um, but generally speaking, you can again use your gut, like think about how something feels when you eat it and how it's gonna potentially affect your baby. But I wouldn't say there's any other like hard and fast, like don't
Okay.
eat this. And I know in some cultures, They like like for instance in South America they would prepare beans by soaking them for like multiple days to make them basically pre-digested so that when you would eat them while breastfeeding it wouldn't cause gas the same way as it would if you just like take a can of beans and heat them up, you know.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. And again, these some of the books that I recommended at the beginning that I put in the document that some of you who just joined might not have it, but I'll link it again in the chat. And there's recommendations in there for postpartum as well. And then there's this book that I love called The First 40 Days, which I've also linked on there, which is specifically about postpartum nutrition. Based on traditional Chinese culture. So it was written by a Chinese woman and it's got beautiful photographs and lots of recipes. So it's got foods that are easily digestible, which is really important when you're postpartum because you don't want to be spending a lot of energy digesting your food. It's recommended in definitely in Chinese culture and I believe in Indian culture as well to not have like cold foods when you're postpartum because it's believed that, well, A, it takes more energy to digest, but also it can in Chinese culture they believe that you need to like keep your womb warm and that if you're
Mhm.
having any cold foods or even if you don't have socks on or whatever that it's going to slow down your healing.
Yeah.
So those resources are great for these postpartum foods. And then I would say anything nutrient dense. Nutrient dense is key because we think about a lot about nutrition when we're pregnant. But when we're breastfeeding, we're still responsible for 100% of our baby's food. And
Hmm.
the baby's now bigger. So the baby's nutritional needs are greater even than when you're pregnant. So
Yeah.
you actually have to keep eating, you know, quite a lot of food. And again, high quality, lots of protein, lots of fat, nutrient dense. So even if you're going to have like if you have a craving for like baked goods, right? Make
Yeah.
sure you have your baking or someone else should bake it for you, right? You shouldn't do it yourself, but have like um you know, I have like a great recipe for like banana bars that has nut butter in it and eggs and it's like, you know, nutrient dense even though it's like kind of like feels like a brownie.
Hmm.
And like things like that that are going to be stews are really good, soups, dals, you know, things like that that are going to be easily digestible, warm, comforting. You want to think
Yeah.
comfort foods, right? So
Yeah.
these things are all great for postpartum and for breastfeeding because again, you're making milk. That milk needs fat. It needs protein. It needs calcium. And anything that you're not, anytime you're not getting enough nutrients, both in pregnancy and postpartum, your baby is always going to be prioritized. So these nutrients are going to come from your stores. And this is why so many women end up with teeth problems when after pregnancy, bone problems after they've had babies, um, and other health issues because we're not resourcing ourselves properly. And so
Hmm.
our babies are sucking out literally all the calcium and iron and protein and fat from our bodies and so we're left with very little and so it's really important to resource yourself enough so that there's enough for you and the baby.
Nice. When is the right time to start establishing a sleep and feeding routine? Because I think probably people have done their research and it says you should feed every 3 hours or you should do this and do that. Like, what actually is the right timing to start the sleep and feeding routine for baby?
So with feeding, I say like for the first 6 months, you just basically feed the baby on demand. So when the baby's hungry, you feed the baby. This is the best way to both regulate your milk supply so that you have just enough, you know, enough for the baby. And also like we don't necessarily know when our babies are hungry, right? Like they know, and so they're going to tell
Mhm.
us. Once you start introducing solid food, I like to do that at meal times, right? So you can introduce solids to your baby, like when you're having dinner, when you're having lunch, when you're having breakfast. And so it starts to establish that routine of like, this is when we eat. And a lot of times that will sort of regulate around the baby's sleep time. So in the same way that um, you kind of regulate the schedule slowly like that with eating. Sleep, you'll see like at first your newborn just sleeps all the time, right? They
Yeah.
just all they do is sleep and eat. And then eventually you're going to see them start to have like bigger wake windows. And what will happen is like they'll have like the longer overnight sleep and where they're maybe waking up between but going right back to sleep. And then eventually they'll have like a bigger wake window in the morning. and then they'll have a sleep window in the morning, and then they'll have a bigger wake window in the middle of the day, and then they'll have a
Mm.
sleep window in the afternoon. And then, so you'll see that they'll start to establish like a time when they're sleepy. And you can tell because they start rubbing their eyes, they start getting cranky, they start like,
Mm.
getting fussy.
Mhm.
Um, and it's good to like go, if you can, go with your baby's natural times that
Sleep
they're
patterns.
tired. This works really well with your first baby. When you have a second baby, all bets are off because you have a toddler. And so
Yeah.
it's like the baby just sleeps when there's time.
Yeah.
But with the first baby, you can kind of follow um their lead as far as like when they're having these wake windows and these windows of when they're tired. And if
Yeah.
you do that and you follow it and you put them to sleep when they're tired and you let them be awake when they're awake, typically it'll establish into a good pattern. But also, all babies are different. Some babies are going to be great sleepers, some babies are going to be terrible sleepers. And unfortunately, that's just the way it
You just
is.
don't know
And
what
there's
you
not much we can do about it.
Yeah, not worth stressing over. They will get the sleep that they need. And
Yes.
I wish I knew that with my first because I really stressed that, oh my gosh, she never takes her siestas and it's
Yeah.
like she just didn't need it then. So just relax.
Yeah.
She'll take the sleep when she needs it.
Yeah. And a great way to get babies to sleep if they like want to be on you all the time, because a lot of babies just want to be held constantly, is baby wearing. So if you wear your baby in a wrap, um, they will usually sleep on you. So that's a
Yeah.
good way to be able to like get things done and let your baby nap. When
Mm,
you go out with a new baby, like especially at, the first couple times you go out into the world, I highly recommend wearing your baby. So, if you put the baby in the car seat, go to your location, take the baby out, put them right in your wrap. And that way you don't have anyone touching them. You don't have them like, really exposed to anyone like breathing on them. They're right here. They're going to sleep the whole time. If they're hungry, you just take
mm.
them out and nurse them, put them back in. So baby wearing is like my all-time favorite parenting hack because it just makes everything easier.
Yeah, that makes sense,
Yeah.
especially when you have a toddler.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on co-sleeping? So I know that Shimaji says that the child should stay in the room with the parents for the first 5 years, but
Mhm.
specifically on co-sleeping, how do you feel about that?
So co-sleeping is what humans have done for pretty much all of human history up until like 150 years ago in the West. And
Hmm.
in a lot of parts of the world, people still co-sleep because it's just like that's the way they do it. And honestly, this is the way to get the most sleep from your baby and for you. With
Mm.
my first, we did not co-sleep. I had him in a bassinet and then in a crib, and I woke up multiple times a night to feed him, and I would like fall asleep in the chair with him, which is not safe. And I was tired. I was very, very tired. And then with my second, we decided to co-sleep, and we did it in a way where he wasn't in the bed with us, but we had like a bassinet that went right against my side of the bed. So
Mhm.
I could roll over and just like take out my breast and he could nurse and I would fall back asleep and then he would be back in his own space. And then as he got bigger, we did the same thing with a crib where we just put it against my side of the bed with one side off. And that worked really well for us. And I got way more sleep with my
Yeah.
second baby because I wasn't waking up and staying awake for like an hour at a time to feed him at night.
So
Um,
my fear with co-sleeping was that if the baby's in the middle, first I thought maybe they'd be suffocated with the blankets moving at night. And then I thought, what if I roll over the baby? So is that a thing?
So there shouldn't be blankets around the baby. So there are safe sleep guidelines. So if you want a bed share, there's 7 points that you're supposed to follow in order for it to be safe. So like no blankets and pillows around the baby. You should be totally sober, and so should your partner, anyone that's in the bed. No older children near the baby. Um, it should be like a firm mattress. You should be breastfeeding. And so normally when you would bed share with a baby, the mother would sleep on her side with this side of her body on the bed and her arm like this, and the baby basically in the crook of her arm with like the breast right next to the
Mhm.
baby. And the
Yeah,
baby's against the mother. So the baby shouldn't be against the father, especially a newborn. As they get older, they like once they're like 3 months old, they can like,
better.
they're pretty hardy at that point. But
Yeah.
it's very important that yeah, the baby should be on the mother. Anna said, do you need to burp the baby after breastfeeding at night, for example? Some babies are different, some don't need to. My son, I used to literally just I would be laying on my side and I would sort of just like flop him over my abdomen and like
Mhm.
pat him a few times till he burped and then flop him back. So I never like got up. I just sort of like flopped him over me.
Yeah.
Um, so you can, but some babies don't need to burp especially if they're laying down and eating. So you can sort of see what your baby does. And if the baby's spitting up a lot, then it's a good idea to burp them. Um, so that I hope I answered your first question about the blankets. And I linked on the document that I sent you all, I linked a document that I have about baby sleep. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
resources in there for safe bed
Okay.
sharing.
Yeah.
And then the second question, what if I roll on my baby? And we talked about this when we talked the other day, and I said, well, do you roll off the side of your bed? And you were like, no. I was like, well, then why would you roll on your baby? Like, you're aware enough when you're sleeping that you're not rolling where you're not supposed to roll, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you and mothers, especially breastfeeding mothers, but even if you're not breastfeeding, you're so in tune with your baby, you know this. When your baby literally breathes loud, you're awake. So
Hmm.
it's hard to imagine a state unless you're not sober, right? Like, and this is what I tell my clients. I'm like, don't have a glass of wine and get in bed with your baby. That's not a good idea because you're going to be sleeping more deeply than you normally would.
Yeah.
Um, what about pumps for breast? Um, let's talk about that at the end because that's a
Yeah.
whole nother, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I
so
think
those
we
are that's
have we've covered a good amount of information. I don't want the discussion to time out, but
mhm,
if you could give a kind of wrap up advice
mhm.
for pregnancy, post-pregnancy women, what would your final thoughts be?
Ooh, do childbirth education.
Yeah.
Make sure you love and are super aligned with your provider.
Yeah.
Um, trust your intuition. So, like again, as
Mhm.
yogis, we have this really powerful tool, which is the ability to feel vibrations and the ability to, which our vibrations is our intuition. You know what I mean? Like regular people are like, trust your gut. Like our gut is our vibrations. Like
Yeah.
we know when something is right and something is wrong based on vibrations.
Yeah.
Even if it's right or right for our part, or, the person next to us, it doesn't mean it's right for us. And so I always tell all my clients this, me, your doctor, your mom, your cousin, your neighbor, everybody's going to give you different advice.
Hmm.
Like the best thing to do is you could take everybody's advice, but ultimately you need to check in with yourself and check in with your husband and check the vibrations if you need to and see like does this feel right for us? And if it does, then that's what you should do, even if
Yeah.
everybody else disagrees. Okay,
Yeah.
because this is your baby and whatever decisions you make, no one else has to deal with any potential fallout than you. So you
Hmm.
are the one that needs to be making these decisions. And like mother says, be your own guru. Like you have all the tools inside of you to make these decisions. Get the
Hmm.
information, check in with yourself and make and you're going to continue to do this through parenthood. So this is like a
Yeah.
really good muscle to start building in pregnancy and you're going to continue to use it like basically
Motherhood.
for
Yeah.
years and years to come.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
would add to that, don't get into the habit of Googling when something's wrong. Start with your circle, start with your people, start with your doctors. But when you start Googling, you go down all the rabbit holes and it causes all the stress and anxiety. So that advice was given to me when I was pregnant, when I had my first child. And till this day, I've never Googled anything because it's just a stress I don't need in my life. So I would say that that is important. And while we should have this trust in ourselves that we know the baby. We should
Mhm.
also trust that baby knows us.
Mhm.
And maybe you can speak on this for 2 minutes. But what I found absolutely fascinating is that 2 days after my daughter was born, she's crying for whatever reason. My husband takes her. He can't get her to stop. I take her in my arms, and instantly she stops crying. And I'm like, we just met. How does she know that I'm the mom? This is
Mhm.
amazing. So there is science behind this, but
Mhm.
what is the science in 2 words? Because it's
Yeah.
it's really an incredible connection, which obviously is formed in the womb, but
Mhm.
trust that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I would argue that for your baby's entire existence, she only knows you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because she's inside you. She knows your heartbeat, she knows your voice, she knows your laugh, she knows your scent. You're actually when you give birth, your nipples smell the same as your amniotic fluid, so that the baby can find the nipple after birth because it smells familiar. And they
Hmm.
can nurse like this is their lifeline. It's so beautifully designed, and so your baby knows you better than anybody else. And like you said, even your husband, your baby's like, I don't know, like I don't want this guy. I want my mom, and
Yeah,
that's all babies are like that because they
Yeah.
know their mother. And so your baby and everything your baby does is a communication with you. So you're gonna know, people ask me, well, how do I know if something's wrong? Like you're gonna know because your baby's gonna tell you and you're gonna listen. So,
Yeah.
strengthen that bond by like in pregnancy talking to the baby and then even postpartum, just talk to the baby, like your baby loves hearing your voice, loves seeing your face, connection. Like that's all they want. That's all they want.
Yeah.
So it's a very
Very
powerful
sweet.
tool.
Maybe you could leave your email and phone number in the chat group,
I put
and
it in the document at the
you put it
bottom.
in. Okay,
Yeah.
so
So
any
anyone that has any,
questions that
yeah.
anyone has, please reach out to Sophia. She is here to support everyone in all the different phases of their life. And I think I don't know if we have time for questions, maybe just one or two, if anybody has any off the top of their head that we can address right now. You should be able to unmute your mics now.
Maybe I talked enough that I said everything.
Well, that's amazing. Okay, so if there are no questions, please feel free to
Oh,
reach out to
so
Sophia.
Anna
Yeah.
had asked about pumping. Do you want me
Yeah.
to
Do you want to
address
address
that?
that? Like, when do we know when we need a pump? And is that the question?
She just said, what about pumps for breast?
I mean, if you don't have enough milk, you'll need to pump because it's like a machine, your body, so you need to get it going. And if you have too much milk, you may need to pump because you need to take away some of the excess milk. No, all wrong. See, that's why she's the expert.
Sorry. Sorry. Okay, so I'll say really quickly. So, milk is a demand and supply. So the more milk is removed, the more milk your body creates. So this is why I say feed on demand because your baby knows how much milk they need. At the beginning, your milk supply is extremely malleable, meaning that like if you have twins, your body very quickly will make enough milk for two babies. If you have a tiny baby with a tiny belly, your body will very quickly realize, oh, I don't need to make that much milk because it's a tiny baby. I'm gonna like, and then when your baby cluster feeds or like has lots of feeds in one day, which happens at times when they have a lot of growth, they're telling your body to make more milk. Suddenly your body's gonna make more milk to accommodate
Mhm.
that baby. So part of the problem with pumping is that, especially in these first like 2 to 3 weeks, I would say, is that we're guessing when we pump. We're guessing how much milk the baby would be taking out, right? So instead, I always recommend like put the baby to the breast because the baby is the best way to get the baby is the most efficient way to get milk out. One, babies get milk out better than a pump. And
Mhm.
two, your baby knows exactly how much they need. Now, if there's a problem with supply, which is actually fairly rare, but if that happens, then pumping can help, like you said, Praga, can help increase your supply if like say the baby's latch isn't great and the baby's unable to effectively remove milk, then a pump can help you keep up with the baby's demand while we address what's going on with the baby's latch. Because ideally, we want to pumping and breastfeeding. A lot of women do it, but it's more work. Like
Yeah.
it's harder to do two things than to do one thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I always recommend waiting for at least 2 to 3 weeks to pump. If you're having any issues breastfeeding, talk to a breastfeeding professional, talk to a lactation counselor. I'm not sure what the credentials are in other countries, but here we have like a couple different layers of like how knowledgeable people are with different lactation issues. So talk to a professional because they will help you make a plan of how to fix whatever's going on and how to meet your goals. A lot of women feel like, oh, I don't have enough milk, so I'm just going to formula feed,
Mhm.
which like is obviously an option, but it's more expensive. And we know that breast milk is the optimal food for babies. So if possible, that's the ideal way to
Mhm.
feed them. So I highly recommend talking to a lactation consultant if you're having any issues. They can also help you decide when to start pumping. Say you need to go back to work and you're going to leave your baby, or you want to start a freezer stash or something like that, then pumping can be helpful. I pumped with my first, he was never away from me, but I pumped so that I could donate milk. So there's lots of reasons to pump, but it's good to have someone who's going to work with you on figuring out a good schedule to do that and a good time to start.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much for all this great knowledge. And yes, we will share the discussion in the chat. And yeah, thanks so much for your time, all your wisdom, and
Thank you.
professional answers. Thank you so much. And
Yeah,
thank you
thanks,
everyone
ladies.
who joined us today.
Congratulations, everybody.